Hey guys, welcome back. All right, so today we are going to be weathering this Rolls Royce Derwent jet engine combustor liner. A lot of people call it the flame tube, some people call it the flame canister. Technically speaking, it's the liner of the flame canister. There's an external shroud that goes over this. The canister is an entire assembly. So this is the liner of the assembly. And this has been painted with Alclad. You can see it's pretty metallic looking here and reflective. This Alclad has been clear coated, and I have a whole method on how to do the Alclad and clear coat it and still keep the reflectivity real good. And I covered that in two different videos, the process. So I do a video on how to paint stormtrooper helmets silver, and I'll link that at the end. And I did a video on painting these metals gold, and the clear coat I did on this is the same process as doing the gold metals minus the tint in the clear coat. So it's just clear coat. It's a two-step process to keep it clear like this. If you want to do something more like the Mandalorian Armor, there's a little tiny difference in the process. Otherwise it's almost the same. I've seen two people now, this isn't what this video is about, but I'm going to talk about this really quick. I've seen two people now do videos on painting Mando armor that are pretty much dead on the way that I figured it out as well. And I've had some of the real Mandalorian armor pieces in my hands, so I've seen them up close and what they look like compared to this, and they're much less shiny than this in person. And I should have a Mandalorian jetpack here to paint really soon, and I'll do a whole tutorial on that if you're curious. Very similar process. Anyway, the whole point of this is we're going to weather this today. I'm going to do mostly acrylics. I might add some oil paints toward the end of the process, but we will see. So anyway, let's get set up here. I have the bottom of an old microphone stand, some random adjustable like fan pipe. This is something I use a lot for painting helmets and so forth, because I can put things on here and I can rotate it and it's not really in the way. Everything's easy to get to. I have an old t-shirt, Jane's Addiction. Got this when I was like 17. It's been worn to death, so we're going to use this to wipe stuff. This is such an awkward camera angle because this is tall enough that it just fits in camera, but for me to be in camera I have to like stand back here, so I'm going to have to crouch a bunch to do this. But anyway, I'm using an airbrush. This is an Iwata Eclipse. You can get a cheap airbrush. I've used very cheap airbrushes for lots of things and they work just fine. But this is the one I got on me today, and I'm going to be using cheap acrylic paints, a few different colors here, and I have a little brush just for a little extra touch up. I do have some black oil paint which is in this bag here. I might get to using that, I'm not positive yet. And I'm going to use Windex to thin the acrylics. A little cup and another little brush here, and anyway, that's it. So to start out with, I'm going to use just a little bit of black just to darken in all the recesses, and I just put some in the cup. You can see it's not very much at the bottom, and I use Windex in the acrylic. It's actually kind of a lot in here, more than I really needed. So I put about, I don't know, maybe like 40% Windex or so, and you have to adjust to taste depending on the acrylics. Like these acrylics are pretty liquid already, so you know 40% Windex is plenty. If you're using like an acrylic out of a squeeze tube, you're going to want to use a little bit more, and that'll be helpful to get it broken up. And if you're using it out of a squeeze tube, let it sit for 10 minutes or so just to help break it up so that it softens up. Otherwise you're going to get chunks and then it's not going to spray real well. So I'm stirring it with the end of a brush. Wipe this off on my shirt here, and then I'm going to load up our airbrush here. Cap it off and just test a little bit. I have a little bit of paper on the table so I can see how it's spraying, and it seems to spray just fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the airbrush to shoot it down into the holes. You can do this with a brush. You can just take a regular paintbrush and put your black paint wherever you want. I'm not a huge fan of just airbrushed weathering. I don't think airbrushing some of it on is a bad thing at all, but what I'm doing here is I'm going to be using the airbrush to distribute it into the low spots like this, and then I can basically wipe off the excess. So it's a way to get it in all the like little crevices more than going for an airbrushed look. Now, I'm gonna leave it on for a few minutes. I'm gonna hit the holes here. And this just really is a faster way to get it in all the little spots. So I'm gonna go around the little bands here. And the thing is, once I clear coat with Auto 2K clear coat, it's a urethane paint, so the surface is very, very smooth, and it actually can repel acrylics. If you just put like a watered down acrylic on here, it'll tend to bead up, but the Windex really helps it stick a lot better. You can see it's kind of staying on all right. Now, I'm going to back off a little bit here so it's a little bit broader. And I'm basically going to do the exact same thing I would do if I used a brush. So I put it on, it looks really, really airbrushy right now, which is not what I want. So I get my shirt here, and then I just kind of wipe off excess. This kind of breaks it up. It's the same as if I just used a brush and patted it in, but it goes faster and it's easier to get it into the nooks and crannies. Whereas with a brush, I tend to, I mean, I'm pretty thorough about it, but it's easier to miss spots. So if you do it this way, you get the nooks and crannies. You do get a little bit of, you know, kind of like accidental, like airbrushy kind of soft spots here and there, which I think are fine. I don't like when it's just a full airbrushy soft pass. That looks very unrealistic to me. So I'm gonna go around this thing and hit all of the areas where there's low spots. So any like little crevices and details, I'm going to just make sure that there's paint wedged down in there pretty good. And right now I'm just using black, but in a second I'm going to add a little bit of brown right to the black paint. Not even worried if it mixes, it's totally fine. I'm going to put a little bit more black back in here. And if you're using acrylic, I just filled this thing way too much. Hold on. If you're using acrylic, it can start to clog in the tip of the airbrush a little bit. And right now, okay. And so I'm going around now and getting in all these little nooks because there's little grooves that are a huge pain to put paint into with a brush. But the airbrush does it super fast. So you just spray it, get it in there. The excess that's on the outside doesn't really matter at this point. I should rotate it the other way so you can see what I'm doing. Next batch I'll rotate around the other way. So this basically just gets it in all the nooks and crannies really fast. Right? So I've gone around one pass, and again, I'm just going to hit it with the shirt, real willy-nilly. I'm not being very careful with how I do this. I'm not trying to wipe it all off. I'm just kind of breaking it up so it doesn't look like it's sprayed on. And this, you know, keeps it in the grooves and so forth. And I've got some at the top, same kind of deal. And these are going to get multiple passes. So these, when you thin the airbrush paint, the acrylic with the Windex, it is a little bit thin, so one pass might not really give it the full amount of coverage you need. I'm going to turn this the other way. Sorry, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to hit this seam. I'm going to hit the little grooves, and if I get some drips here, doesn't really matter because I'm going to be wiping this down anyway. And I'm going to hit this groove around here one more time. And hopefully you can see why this is much faster than using the brush, because the brush I would just have to really work it into these little details like crazy, and the airbrush just gets it in there really fast. I'm going to hit these guys, these nozzles. And I'm going to hit these little guys here, pain. So like I said, anywhere where there's a groove or a notch, you want to fill it in. I'm spraying it kind of heavy and, like I said, super willy-nilly right now. I don't even know how much it shows up on camera. In person, you can see a lot, but with weathering, in general, if you're weathering something for camera, you need to weather it like 3 times as much as you think, because in person this looks very, very dirty to me, but I can see on camera it's barely showing up. So I'm gonna go a little heavier here. I'm gonna keep going heavier anyway, but there we go. Get my shirt, my trusty old Jane's Addiction shirt from when I was in high school. I'm gonna get this thing up here, leave some natural streaks and stuff. I'm not trying to wipe it all off. I'm leaving enough streaks. Now you might ask, if I'm gonna weather it so much, why do the really shiny base coat? Because it is gonna get a lot of weathering, and the shiny base coat helps, because even if I weather this thing like crazy, the little tiny bits that show through, if they look very realistic, like they're real metal, it's much, much more convincing than if I just did a spray paint coat and then did the weathering pass. Another thing some people like to do, which I'm not a fan of unless I really, really have to do it, is doing a clear coat after the weathering. I do not like that, especially if it's something that's supposed to look metal and then you weather it. Adding a clear coat to that is just it totally screws up the effect. Because one of my favorite things about this kind of weathering is that, especially with acrylics, they matte the finish a little bit. So if you have like a really shiny metal surface and then where the weathering is sort of matted, it feels more realistic. And if you weather it and then you spray some kind of clear coat over it, you either flatten out the shiny stuff, which you don't want to do, or you shine up the matted weathering, which you also don't want to do. And you kind of unify the surface reflectivity in a way that I find to look very, very fake. So when people have like an X-Wing helmet or something, they weather it all crazy and then they clear coat it. Don't do that. I mean, if it has to always look the same and you can never worry about the weathering coming off, it always has to look perfect, maybe. But I think it kind of ruins the effect a little bit, personally, my personal preference. So right now I'm going to add some brown here. I don't even know like how good this paint is. Some of these acrylics are very old, so this one's a little better. I'm just going to squirt this stuff in here. This actually might have been thinned out already before. So a little bit of brown, and it's mixed with black, so it's very dark, but just has a little bit of a brown tinge to it, so it doesn't quite look like I'm using black acrylic. Wipe this down, break out the airbrush again. Still got a bunch of black in here. We're going to mix this in, pour the brown in. And mixing the colors like this and working in a few layers really helps add to the realism. And I'm going to go a little broader on this one. See, my airbrush is clogging a little bit. With these Iwata airbrushes, with any of them, with the Eclipse, you can take this little piece here and pull it. So you can push down here. It's a dual action airbrush, so if you push down, you just get air, and if you push down and pull back, you get a little bit of spray. So if it's ever clogging, you can, with these, you can pull this little piece back, and it really pulls the needle back far, and sometimes it'll unclog. Another trick, dump some of this out, is you can spray the air and then put your finger over the tip, and I'm probably gonna get this everywhere, but you go like this, and then as you open the needle, it'll, see how it bubbles through the little container here? that sometimes will also unblock your airbrush if you're ever having issue. But anyway, let me see here. This thing running again. There we go. So, all right, back to it. Add a little bit of the brown. And I'm okay with like some light airbrushy look if it's subtle, but if it looks like the whole thing has just been airbrushed, I feel like that looks kind of cheesy. I don't want to do that. But I will be doing, with the brown, I think it looks better than with the black paint. Again, in camera, it's so crazy how much this doesn't show up in camera. In person, it looks very weathered. And this is going to be on display at someone's house, so I want to not overdo it because someone's going to be looking at this in person all the time. So I'm going to go slightly lighter on the weathering than I would if this was going to be used on camera. However, I'm not going to go too light. Back this up a little bit. Got a little bit of schmutz in there. There we go. This off. There we go. Now it's spraying nice. And what's nice about these is that I have a real one that I molded to make all these replicas off of. So I've seen how the real ones get weathered, and I'm taking some liberties, obviously, making it look a little more like it's been lived in. But you can see how it gets some very interesting weathering marks. So what I was talking about before with the Mandalorian armor, it's basically the same process I would do for this, except when I do the final clear coat, I don't put down a barrier layer first. I put the 2K clear coat right onto the top of the Alclad, and it deadens reflections a lot. So it won't be this reflective, but it looks just like how the real screen used Mandalorian armor looks. There we go. This gives it some a little bit more natural kind of look, and you can see how far away I am right now, and I'm getting a little bit of this brownish black, just dusting it around, and I'm missing the garbage truck. I always videotape the garbage trucks picking up my trash because it's funny. I can hear it right now, but instead I'm making a freaking tutorial. Real loosey-goosey because I want it to look random. And I want it to look like most of this thing is kind of dirty, so make sure it's got some reasonable amount of splatter on here. And while it's on here, now it's going to be starting to dry. It dries fast with the Windex, which is kind of nice. Take this shirt and still hit it here and there, cause some smudges and some marks like it's been touched while it's been dirty. Kind of helps add to it. I'm going to do majority of my marks. I'm going to try to pull down so that I just kind of hit the high spots mostly with the wiping here, and not so much of the low spots. I definitely want to keep as much of the schmutz as possible. And if you want to push down here and there and kind of rub through the finish so you get some more shiny areas, that works fine too. I'm going to show this close to the camera because I feel like it doesn't show the amount of weathering, but You can see it starting to show up. It's funny, in camera, even this close, it looks way less weathered than it does in person. So, as a note to self, if you need it to look good in camera, weather it a lot, because this is starting to look heavy in person. Not enough on camera though. So, all right, I'm gonna go a bit heavier here. So another good thing about this being clear coated is that it's really sturdy. So typically the Alclad itself is pretty sturdy, and if you weather it and you wipe it, it'll be okay. But if you have to wipe it a lot, you might start to damage the actual Alclad if you're just doing just straight Alclad. And then I've done some before, works okay. But this clear coat means that I can really bear down on this if I need to. And if I really want to remove some, if it looks too heavy, I can use the Windex on a cloth and really work through the weathering and bring back some of the shininess if I need to. So I'm going to skip ahead here. I'm going to do a little thing. I'm going to pour this in here, hit this up. We'll come back to this in a second, kind of let this stuff dry. A thing that I really like to do that is maybe a little different as far as the weathering is, look at this, I forgot to put my little needle protector back on. I like to use like a little kind of like turquoise color, just a little tiny bit, and put this on something here so I can spread it around. A little bit of like a turquoisey color, and I feel like this color, even though the type of metal these are made out of wouldn't patina in such a way that you get a turquoise, a little bit here and there really makes metal items feel like aged metal, even if it's not the type of metal that typically gets this kind of patina. It's real subtle, so not like going crazy with it like if it was copper or brass, but just like little bits here and there. This is a thing that I picked up from looking at some of the stuff at Studio 80i on the Predator helmets. A lot of the Predator helmets are like a steely kind of gray color, and they will put a little bit of this turquoise color in with the weathering, and it makes it feel so realistically metal in person. So, you know, it kind of implies that this is maybe near some other metal items or something like this. And this container, when it's all done, is going to be mounted on a copper tube. So I'll probably do a little bit of weathering on the tubing as well. So with this, I just kind of like splatter on some bits here. I don't know if you can see that. And I wipe off almost everything. So there's just like a little, there'll just be like a tiny little trace down in some of the grooves here. And I don't do it everywhere, just little hints here and there. And man, I feel like it really adds to the metallic look. It makes it feel pretty real. And there's like some other colors too. Bright orange works really well. Like it's like a very bright orange, gives it sort of kind of like rusty feel here and there. And that's nice. And like I said, I know this isn't typically the kind of metal that would get a patina, but if you find stuff outside in nature, you'd be surprised at how metals react to certain things in the environment and the weird colors that end up on stuff. So a little bit here and there, not going to go too crazy, but just enough to kind of make it feel hopefully like a more of a real thing, because this is just a resin casting. And even with this is still going to get probably another pass or two of the airbrush. Kind of looks like something dripped on it. It's kind of on one side here. Alright. I know it's funny in camera. You guys can, I don't know if you guys can see this or not. It is looking very weathered. So This is plenty. I don't want to go too much crazier on this teal stuff because it's going to start to become too much. I just want a little bit. Like I said, I wipe most of it off. My favorite ones are when it looks like it's kind of settled in a little groove or something, like something dripped and it just settled down in a spot. So you get just a little hint there. That looks nice. So with my brush that I've just been using, I'm going to squirt this off with a little bit of Windex as well. Windex works really great to clean acrylic paints. There we go. Now, back to the airbrush. A couple more thin passes here. And then what I'm going to do there we go. Now the thing is, if I was doing this over a spray painted part, the metallic parts would not look nearly as realistic once you start to add the weathering. I feel like it just flattens out really bad. So let me grab another cup here really quick. I'm going to do some light tan color as well, which is this Country Twill beige color, just to kind of add a little bit of like a sandy look, like a little bit of natural dust. And this is one of the things where I was talking about, if you seal in your weathering, you lose an effect that, like if I use this beige and it looks a little bit flat and hazy, but then the metal looks really shiny, as soon as you seal it, if you use a matte sealer or a gloss sealer, whichever one you use, you're gonna unify those two different surface effects that are really nice to not unify. It's nice to have dull spots and shiny spots, and as soon as you seal it, you kill that effect. So keep that in mind. That's me complaining. Lots of places like to do that. I'm not a fan unless it absolutely needs to be done for some reason. Here's an old cup, something else I used. This has dust in it. Hang on 1 second. Windex, knock out the dust, and then I'm going to make some tan. Same thing I did before, mix-wise. It's going to be a little blob in the bottom, not very much, and then about the same amount of Windex. I'm just going to mix it up here so it's soft. It's kind of like sort of like milk consistency. That's kind of what you're going for, and it's two tastes. It's not like a necessarily method. This might be a tiny bit thick. I'm going to do one more squirt of Windex, 2 more squirts. Wipe off the excess. Put it in the airbrush here. Cap it off. Get it spraying. There we go. Alright, so this light color, just going to do a little bit of dustings to kind of give the feel that some desert dust has settled on the tops of things. So just kind of hitting the top edges of stuff from far away. Oh, see that? I just squirted a bunch right at the top and it got really close to getting on another project I'm working on. That would have sucked. So yeah, just a really light amount here. I'm not going crazy with this one. And that's about it for that. I'm not going to go further with that one. I'm going to pour out the rest. It's all it really needed, just a little tiny bit. Spray out the excess here with the airbrush. Got the airbrush cap. That kind of cleared off here real quick before I forget. Bling. So, get my shirt. I'm going to hit any little dots here that are maybe a little strong. And on the tops of these where I put the stuff, the lighter color, I'll show you up close because I know it doesn't show up well on camera. You can see there's a little bit here. Now, if you go back to the beginning of the video and you look at the reflectivity, you can see there's a lot of stuff on here, but it's not dark. It's not made to look like it's super filthy. It's made to look aged. So that comes into a thing that I was thinking about doing earlier with the using the oil paints. Oil paints look very much like realistic grime. I've got two here. They're both black. And I like the oil paints because they have like a totally different kind of feel. Like the airbrush, you get the spray and it looks like aged, like it's been outside, like it's been, you know, just kind of kicking around and getting dusty and dirty and smoky. It gives that kind of feel with the acrylics. But with the oil paints, it gives it a legitimately very, very realistic kind of like greasy feel, like it's a mechanical part that got dirty, and when you wipe it off, it just acts differently than the acrylics. And it's kind of a different finish. The way the oil is dry is different, and that goes back to, again, what I was saying about clear coating the weathered finish. The type of finish the oil has versus the acrylic is very different. And if you're using both and you add some oil paints into the grooves and wipe them off, it's going to, it gives such a nice look between the little bit of shine on the oil and the flatness of the acrylics, and then the metallic look. And I know I keep saying it over and over, I'm trying to drive it home. If you seal it, you now basically homogenize all of those looks into one look, and that is a shame. So anyway, I'm going to take my shirt here, I'm going to go over what I just sprayed, and I'll show this on camera in a second here. And this is dry now. The Windex makes it dry really fast, so I'm pushing down really hard and I'm lifting off little bits of the weathering in a way that it looks like maybe it was cleaned at some point, and it gives the impression that this thing that's old is still being interacted with. So if you're, you know, got some old hardware, or like an old, think about like an old engine where you open it and you're driving the car all the time, the engine is cruddy, but then you wipe off an area and it's still cruddy, but like some parts of it are clean. That's kind of what I'm going for here. So I'll wipe off some of this dried stuff, like I said, over these pieces here. This is a real good example. I'll put this by the camera so you can see it. Again, I'm putting down some pressure, and it's basically taking all the edges of those little holes and pulling the metal surface up, so it looks like it's been, you know, wiped down from time to time, but not enough to really clean it. There we go. Let me see here if I can get this to work in camera. So I don't know how well that's showing up. Looks freaking great in person. I am excited. So now most of this acrylic stuff is dry. I've got these little areas that look like they're kind of cleaned through. So then I'm going to add a little bit of oil. I'm going to use this this small little oil here. Now there's the difference between these two is that this one is a water thinnable oil. I actually never use it that way. I got it with the intent of being able to thin it out, but I found that with this type of finish, it just doesn't work as well. It kind of gets, it beads up and doesn't stay on the surface very well. But if I use it right out of the bottle as is without adding water, it works these two are almost identical as far as the way they work, but as soon as you add water, it gets a little, I'm not a fan of it. So either one of these will work fine. Let me grab a little brush here. Let me grab a chip brush, because chip brushes are cheaper here, more disposable. Actually, I might have a better chip brush. I'll be back in a second. All right, I'm back. I wanted to grab a grimier old chip brush because no need to wear out a new one. So take my little oil paints here, and I'm gonna put these on. Let me see. I'm gonna bring myself a palette, which I should have. I'll just put them on a little piece of wood here. And this paint, there you go. Just a little booger of oil. Massage this around a little bit because it's been sitting for a while. So there's a little oil. Doesn't take very much. And oil paint on a 2K like urethane clear coat surface is awesome. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna pick some little areas where it needs a little different type of grime here, and I'll show you guys in person. I'll put it up to the camera here in a second because I feel like the difference in these types of paints is really obvious when you see them next to each other. See if this will focus. So this is the oil right here. You can see a little bit. Once it's wiped down, it feels very, very realistic. Like a it feels very, very realistic. Like more realistic than the acrylic, in my opinion, as far as like grime goes. Like like an oily, smudgy kind of gross grime. It's definitely the more real of the two, especially in person. Like when you wipe it around, you see it just smudges and gets freaking gross. Like, see how it just gets really gnarly, and it shows up like crazy in camera. Now, the thing with oils is they take longer to dry. So if you do the oil paints on here like this won't be dry for a day or two. And I'm not going to go crazy. I just want some here and there just to kind of add to it, because the acrylic is real nice. I don't want to mess that up. But the oils just really, really help some of this stuff pop out. I'm trying to be random about it as much as possible. Like I said, the oil sticks to stuff a lot better than the acrylic. Acrylic, especially on urethane surfaces, tends to like beat up and move around. You can add a gel medium to it, which will help, but I still think that the oils are definitely better. I'm gonna add a little bit here, like these things maybe drip or something. I know in real life that's not how they work, but do that and you smudge it down. And the oil paint, like I said, stays pliable for a while. So if you can really manipulate it, wipe it in one direction, and cause streaks and stuff that just look great. This one. I'll put this up to the camera again because I feel like immediately you can see how the oils look so much more like real grime. Little bits here and there. I don't want to go too crazy. Again, in person this looks much more weathered than it does on camera, so try not to ruin that look. I want it to look good in someone's house. Kind of like just tapping it into areas to help accentuate some of these details a little more. Wipe off the excess. almost done, I think, with this one. And again, back to the surface stuff. These little spots where the oil and the acrylic come together. I don't know again how much this shows up on camera, but in person it makes the metal look so realistic. And if I were to clear coat it, would ruin that. You're gonna get sick of me saying this, but I'm gonna say it 100 times. Like it kind of will ruin that look. Or if you're going to clear coat, like let's say you have some specific dusty weathering and you want to add clear coat, I think it's still important to maybe do a couple washes of extra weathering on top of that. You know, if you really want it to look like a real thing and not like a toy. I know a lot of prop people do that. If it, you know, continuity, if they're worried about the weathering coming off. But typically, if I weather a thing like this and just touch it, the weathering's not going to come off. The weathering stays on. It's freaking paint, so it's not coming off anywhere. So there's no need to necessarily clear coat it. All right, trying not to get myself carried away. It's very easy to just keep going with this. You can weather something forever. It's funny because like I like the oil paint so much. When I use acrylic, I almost forget how good the oil looks on there. So I'm just like, yeah, I should go back and hit everything with oil again. Let me go pull this in again so you guys can see it up close. It's all real dingy looking. It's pretty cool. Another thing too is that the auto clear coat that I use is very resistant to chemicals. So if I were to take I don't know, like alcohol or I mean the Windex or whatever, wouldn't hurt this at all. So I could go in here and if I wanted to lift some of this weathering off, wipe it down again, I could hit it with, I mean, this clear coat's made for cars, so it can get like gasoline on it and so forth, and it won't ruin it. So stuff like naphtha, which is a, you know, like a thinner, you can wipe that on here and it really is not going to do anything to it. It's not going to do anything to the clear coat. It'll probably take off the acrylic, maybe the oil, but the clear coat should stay nice, and that means that the Alclad underneath that's protected should still be in good shape. But yeah, anyway, I think I'm happy with the way this looks. But when we're shot up by the camera, it's subtle. It looks way more weathered in person. I keep saying it, but it's if you compare it to the original version, you'll see that it's quite a lot. It's a lot less shiny than it was initially. So anyway, here it is. I'll maybe insert a shot from the beginning so you can see the difference right here. Again, this is weathered to look good in person. If you're going to weather it for camera, weather it twice as much. So yeah, that's how I did it. Airbrush, a couple colors, 3-4 colors, and then a little bit of oil paints to kind of help it pop. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully it's helpful, and we'll see you kids soon. Bye!